Hey, everybody. Welcome to Away Games, a Chicago Cubs and baseball podcast hosted by two comedians who live in New York but love the Cubs. I'm one of them. My name is Adam Amawala. I'm here with Kevin McCaffrey. We're both in Queens. That doesn't always happen, it seems to me.
It doesn't
but,
always.
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right. It doesn't always happen. One of us was on the grounds at Wrigley Field this week, which is extremely not in Queens, and it was extremely not me. It was very much you and our good friend Ken Schultz, and you're going to be doing a lot of talking about that later in this podcast. This is a teaser for later. I'm going to completely clear out, so the Wrigley boys, the fellas who've been called up in September, can talk about it, but I guess you can quick tease it now.
Yeah, so I feel like I alluded to this on the last few podcasts, but a good friend of mine, Amy, who has season tickets for the Cubs, this was the like friends and family season ticket holder event that I assume they have once a year. Just so happens to have been the weekend that I was headlining Zany's Rosemont. Those shows were a lot of fun. And so Ken Schultz and I got to go not only to Wrigley, but on the field at Wrigley. And I tell you what, I've never been on a professional baseball field before that I can recall. I guess maybe at Safeco, I think I was on the warning track or something like that. But to just walk out onto the field and not get tackled immediately, it's quite a thrill.
Yeah. Were there, I have so many questions to ask, but I'm sure you'll address them all.
No, I mean, if you have a couple preliminary ones, why not?
Is there, what was, just in terms of stepping onto the field, was there anything that surprised you, like physically about the field or the view from the field? Because one thing when I've been down on a field before, it's like the curviness. I love my curvy field. The like curves off the edges of it kind of surprised me.
Yeah, I guess it's just, as someone who, humble brag, has also been on the floor at Madison Square Garden, it is very jarring to see the other side of the view that we've had our entire lives. I think that's the best way to describe it, is like, we have been to so many games at Wrigley. We've seen so many views watching on TV. To then be in it, it's like, yeah, it's hard to describe. Like,
yeah,
I really tried to soak in like standing in particular places that were of importance to me, in the same way that I used to put up those pictures on our Twitter at Away Games Pod of like, this is the spot where Schwarber hit that home run, and this is the spot where, so like I'm looking at the 368 marker and I'm like, yeah, that's exactly where Bryant hit that home run in Game 5. But yeah, I the only thing I'd say, and I don't know if this has anything to do with the fact that the Cubs are out of town, I feel like the grass was a little thicker than I thought it would be. Like standing on
it is interesting.
It looked so fine, but it seemed like a little longer than I thought. But I don't know if that's a Wrigley thing. I feel like they would always talk about the infield grass being kind of long. Would they not?
I think they would. And that is a thing that I know grounds crews, at least back in the day, used to sort of cater to what the team wanted to, because depending on how your infield's made up, depending on if you're a speed team or whatever, you want the grass longer or shorter. So yeah, I wonder if that's a thing that varies year to year, but that is an interesting
thing. Which feels like it should be illegal. Like, imagine if you like had a shorter team and in basketball and you wanted to like lower the rims just when you were shooting on a particular hoop.
Right, we're doing 8-foot rims on our side. That's how I used to do my birthdays all the time when I was like in middle school, grade school. Go to a place that had the full court adjustable rims, get my mom to record it on a VHS camcorder, and absolutely get to dunking.
The amount of dunk contests that I did in my driveway with a low rim where nobody was jumping more than 4 inches off the ground, I can't even put a number on it. Just
a lot of like walking shoves of the ball into the thing, but that's great. So you, Adam and Ken, our good friend Ken Schultz, are gonna, the second half of this podcast is gonna be them going in depth about that fun on-field Wrigley experience. And before that, I'll hang out, and you can once again follow us at Away Games Pod on Twitter and Instagram, all the things. But we'll talk current Cubs things.
Cubbies are hot. Cubbies are hot, baby. 5 out of 6 games.
They are 5 out of 6. I think they're, as we speak now, as we record on Tuesday, I think there's something like 32 and 20. I think they're like 4 games over, like something like 32 and 28 since the All-Star break, which
it is shocking.
Mind you, is still bad overall. It's still bad, as Jim Moore once said.
We sucked.
But that is, I got the soundboard up from my other podcast, so there we go. but they've been winning, and it's not completely smoke and mirrors because I don't think the Cubs were fully as bad as they were in the first half. It's a little bit of progression to the mean, I guess. Now, how
They
many of the
also played the Marlins and the Pirates in these last two series.
Yes, that is helpful for winning 5 out of 6. But yeah, you're not wrong that they've been hot, and they've been it's much more fun when you're watching a game, no matter what the season is, if they're winning. So
Right. I have to say that of everyone that we've seen recently, like Kiros, of course, is a great story, but
sure, he's fun. Yeah,
yeah, in terms of someone who's like actually potentially going to make an impact on the next winning Cubs team, watching Wesneski has been a lot of fun, and I mean, particularly that immaculate inning that he had on Thursday. The command that he has on that, I guess it's a slider, I assume, right? That breaking pitch. I mean, that thing is just drops off the table in a hurry.
Yeah, the slider is really plus plus. Like the slider is just from Wisniewski. That is one of the better sliders you're gonna see. And when he's commanding it, I think it's just a really good pitch. And one thing he has said is that the Cubs want him throwing his best pitch more, which is specifically that slider. So that is one thing that is coming over from the Yankee system and the Scott Efros trade, who just got a save for the Yankees. He's back healthy again. Good to see that for Scott. That's one adjustment they're making, and his fastball, his velocity is fine. It doesn't play up that well. I think we were talking about that last week. His fastball sort of plays down in terms of its spin and all that. But the velocity is fine, good enough to keep you honest. But that slider's a true wipeout, and his changeup has been getting better too. And as you said, he threw an immaculate inning. That's what that is. If you don't know, it's 9 pitches, 9 strikes, 3 strikeouts in an inning. About as perfect as he can be. So yeah, he's I think he's had enough starts to be interesting right now.
Right. Yeah, and he seems like a fiery character. Like he had kind of a Justin Steele-esque coming off the mound moment after a big out, like slapping his glove and getting pumped up. And that's awesome. He certainly, I don't know how he felt about being traded to the Cubs from a team like the Yankees, but like he would not be pitching these games for the Yankees right now. So I'm sure it's a thrill for him to get that opportunity. And again, Adrian Sampson continues to be pretty impressive. We saw Wade Miley get hurt again, which
it sucks.
Yeah. I mean, it has to be so frustrating when you spend all that time getting back into shape, and especially with back stuff, I feel like you can't, there's a certain amount of that you really can't control.
Yeah, and he's in his mid-30s and going into, he's going to be a free agent after the year. And I think it was a good flyer for the Cubs to take. It was $10 million for the year. But again, money for a Cubs-sized team, as a fan, you cannot think money matters until at the most until you're getting to the competitive the CBT, the competitive balance tax, which the Cubs are nowhere near. So it was a good use of $10 million on the chance that you either had a very productive pitcher, as he was last year and has been for many years in his career, or if you got someone to flip at the deadline, which they would have done if he had been healthy. Well, I say they would have done. They didn't flip Smiley. They didn't flip Contreras. So I guess I'm not sure they would have flipped him, but I guess that would have been the idea. So yeah, it's been too bad to see him. But also, when you talk about Wesneski and Sampson, I think those are the two starters to focus on recently. And Sampson, I mean, we're getting near, he's put up 100 innings, I think, and the ERA is in the low 3s. I mean, this is at some point now, and this is sort of the pitching equivalent of the Frank Schwindel season last year. Similar age, similar sort of weird breakout in a sense. So I'm not saying it's bang on. This is what he's going to be going forward for a few years or anything. But I think it is getting to the point where we're seeing that this is not a total outlier in his ability, and makes him pretty interesting going into next year as like a back of the rotation to depth piece.
Yeah, I mean, would it be a mischaracterization to say that he has been to the second half Cubs what Keegan Thompson was to the first half Cubs?
No, I think that's a pretty good comp, and those are two guys who are probably going to be, if the Cubs keep Sampson around, which I just don't see why you wouldn't. Right. I just keep him on the 40 man and all that. I think Thompson and Sampson are probably two guys who are going to be sort of circling each other in role, like back of the rotation starter, or swingman sort of relievers. So I think that is that's a very good comp. And Thompson's younger, but only by like 3-ish years. I think Thompson's
Right.
27 and Sampson's 30-ish. So
Plus, I mean,
yeah,
Thompson and Sampson, not a bad buddy cop show.
no, it is. It's a very 70s esque
Yeah.
buddy cop.
Thompson and Sampson and Sons.
Just mash them all in there. Yes, get it. Yeah, that sounds like an improv scene spinning wildly out of control. So yeah, and the Cubs overall ERA, I want to say, I just saw the stat, is third or fourth in the league since the
Right.
All-Star break, which is crazy looking at the names here. And beyond the players to get excited about, I think what you can actually get excited about here is at the major league level Cubs pitching infrastructure when it comes to planning and coaching.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about the whole, like, we don't want to hear about the pitch lab anymore,
Yes.
but we are finally starting.
Yes.
Yeah, we are finally starting to see some pieces come up and make an impact on the pitching side, which is something that we kind of by design were not seeing before, because that was the whole mindset of Epstein, was like, I'll buy pitching, but we're going to develop our hitting talent. Speaking of Schwindel, who you brought up, he was granted his release by the Cubs. He has now signed on with a Dominican team, and I don't know about you, but first of all, I wish him well. And secondly,
Of course.
you ever seen the video of Nate McLouth speaking Spanish?
I mean, no, and how many people on earth have been asked that but I mean, I know exactly who you're talking about, Nate McLouth, who had some good times
Nate
with the
McLouth,
Pittsburgh Pirates, I believe.
former All-Star, nice head of hair, kind of Ken doll looking fella, but like very white bread looking.
Yeah.
Not only speaks perfect Spanish, but he speaks perfect like Dominican accented Spanish. There's I'll text you this video later.
Yeah.
It's truly incredible, to the point where like our friend Christian Polanco, who's a big soccer podcaster and is Dominican.
The Cooligans, yeah.
Yes, all of the comments on this video are like, if I close my eyes, I think I'm listening to a Dominican person speak. It's the most jarring, funny thing. He does this interview in Spanish, and it's that incredibly like Sammy Sosa type, baseball been very good to me. Trying to put on a show for the fan. You always have to say, instead of game, it's gang. That kind of act. But so all that to say that nothing would make me happier than seeing that come out of Frank Schwindel's mouth in 2 years.
I would love to see it. You know, he's going to be getting people. He's going to be sharing survey says with whatever the equivalent of Murphy's Bleachers is down there, and maybe a brief RIP to a brief but very fun Cubs career from Schwindel, who was Offensive Player of the Month last year.
Yeah.
You know, at the major league level, had a great second half. Struggled with injuries, struggled with inconsistency this year, but really enjoyed. He enjoyed every sandwich when he was up in the majors. He was always like having a good time. You know, there are photos of him like hanging out, having a beer at Murphy's Bleachers, very like 60s Cubs style, Santo-esque. So I hope he had a great time here, and glad to see he's caught on with the team in the Dominican, and hopefully bounces back up to the majors or gets a good deal in Asia or something next year. So glad to see him still going.
It would be funny to find out that he was just the modern Mark Grace, just different woman every night from Wrigleyville. He doesn't seem like the type, but he is a big league ball player. What do I know?
He is a big league ball player. Yeah, he could be sneaking in. That's the double guns. That's for he's bringing it. And
also speaking of other prominent 2021 Cubs, Patrick Wisdom essentially, I don't know, is the best comp, like a very poor man's Kyle Schwarber, like ton of power, not much in terms of batting average, but like, I mean, he might hit 30 home runs this year. I think he's got 26 now. He also got thrown at seemingly intentionally because of hitting a couple home runs. Didn't love that.
Oh, I missed that. Who threw at him?
Our old pal Dwayne Underwood.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, he acted like it wasn't on purpose, but Wisdom had hit a couple long home runs and certainly like stopped to watch the one earlier in that game, and then he got drilled. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. Well, that's horseshit, Dwayne Underwood. Wisdom doesn't seem like a guy you'd want to mess with either. He's pretty put together, like he seems like a friendly guy, but he's a strong fella. Yeah. His numbers on the year.
Yeah. I was just going to say I would neither challenge him to a fight or a dance off.
No, we know he's got those moves too. And if you're strong and you can dance, I think that probably bodes well for fighting,
I
because
think,
he's going to be
yeah,
elusive too.
yeah.
25 he's got 25 doubles on the year, 25 homers, batting average of 210, the on base of 303, slugging 436. So the OPS is just 5% above league average, and the wins above replacement with pretty horrendous defense at third this year
Right.
is only .9 WAR from Wisdom. But I think what you might be looking at, and this isn't whether it's the way I'd go or not, in terms of a role for Wisdom going
Hmm.
forward. Next year, old Mash Mervis is looking more and more likely to be the
Man.
Cubs' first baseman next year, 25-year-old first base prospect. If you don't know about him, he's undrafted. He was an undrafted free agent out of college, but it's kind of a misnomer because it was after COVID times. It was the 5-round draft. So this is a guy who probably would have been, more highly thought of than you'd think of as a typical undrafted free agent. But the guy's hitting over 300 across 3 levels of minors this year. He just keeps hitting homers in the playoffs at AAA at this point. I think he's at 36 homers on the year.
That one the other day was ridiculous to watch.
He's relatively new to hitting full time because there were teams that were looking at him more as a pitcher out of Duke. He was up to 92-ish off the mound as a right-handed pitcher. I think he's a right-handed pitcher. Swings lefty, but yeah. So this is a guy, even though he's a little older than you would think, he's 25. That I think Wisdom brought me to him because I think if you are looking at possibly Mervis to start in the at first base to begin next year, that I think you probably want to pair him with someone, a right-handed bat at first base, and maybe you could see Wisdom sort of sticking around in that role, a little bit of utility and getting some
Right.
regular starts at first against left-handers.
Yeah, and we've also seen the Cubs trying out Wisdom in the outfield, which I don't know if
Mm.
that's going to stick, but he actually made a couple nice plays out there. What is Wisdom's WAR, by the way, this year?
Point
Do you
nine,
still have it
according
at 0.9?
to
Okay.
according to Baseball Reference, it's probably slightly different.
Yeah, and I mean,
Fangraphs.
I didn't know how unreasonable of a comparison that was, but I'm looking at Schwarber's numbers this year: 1.3 WAR, batting 214, 42 homers. OBP is 314, so nothing amazing.
Mhm.
OPS is 801. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's like a completely insane thing to say that Wisdom is somewhat of a poor man's Schwarber in that way.
Right. Yeah. I think poor man's is correct there. I mean, I think that in terms of the bat profile, it's similar strengths and weaknesses, even though
Right.
the strengths are stronger with Schwarber. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a relatively good comp. Who else has caught your eye this week, over the past week, Cubs wise? Anybody in particular?
Well, I do like that they're kind of giving a lot of different guys the opportunity to come in and save opportunities. Like I think that's been, while I would have
Hmm.
loved to have seen Rowan Wick just be dominant and maybe take over that role, the
Hmm.
fact that he wasn't has allowed the door to be open for. I mean, how many guys have gotten saves in the past month? Like Hughes has gotten a save, Ullman got his first save, Leiter's gotten a save.
Right.
So I think that's a kind of a cool thing to do in a season that is completely lost at this point, is to just see how people do in different situations that they're not usually in, whether that's Wisdom in the outfield, whether that's people getting save spots
Hmm.
that usually would be in the earlier innings. So I don't know if there's any like particular player other than Kiros, just because it's a good story, that's
Right.
jumped out at me. I think if anything, when it comes to Morel, seeing him now for almost a full season, I think we're seeing a little bit closer to like what we're really going to get with him, which is that like he's not. I don't see Morel as being a superstar caliber player, but I do see him as being someone who's like a useful guy to have around on your team.
I think so too, and he also is young. He's 22.
Mhm.
I don't think he's turned 23 yet, but he's young. He didn't even have a ton of time at AAA, I don't believe. So, and with his athleticism and the way he did show an ability to sort of take more pitches more earlier in the year and get on base at a little higher of a rate than I anticipated. I do think there's chance for him to have a little bit of growth here above what we've seen on the full year. But yeah, it's probably not the 870 OPS guy that we saw in the first 2 months or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, I think Morel is one of those guys I would put towards the top of the list of the guys who I could see as a not regular starter,
Mhm.
but start a couple games a week and then fill in all over the place, coming off the bench, and that's a cool thing to have. I think
Yeah.
in this year, and listening to Cubs podcasts and reading blogs and stuff and all these things, I think the optimism can be a little too much on like, this could be a useful piece on a winning team when you're like, everyone's the 26th man. I think that we can get a little bit like that where no, they're many of them probably aren't, but I think Morel fits that role very well.
Yeah, and speaking to that idea of like everyone being the 26th man, I will say the other the other thing that stood out the most being at Wrigley on Saturday, on an otherwise lovely day, is like we got to walk into the Cubs locker room, and you get to like walk down through the dugout. You walk through that hallway that you've seen like all those pump up videos of like Rizzo and Bryant and everybody smacking the wall and walking past the Cubs logos, and then you go into the locker room, which is beautiful. But man alive, when you see all the jerseys hanging there, it is a far cry from a lot of the names that we've seen in the past few years to be like scanning around and being like, Quiroz and Leiter Jr. and like very, very, very few names to get excited about. And I don't even think Contreras was in there because he's not on, he's injured right now. So
yeah, he's on the injured list. And Sahadev wrote in a mailbag about what he thought the direction would be with Contreras, which maybe we'll talk about a little more next week, because I feel like that's a deeper topic to get into when we have so much fun stuff to talk about, you and Ken to talk about today. But before we go to you and Ken, I will say one thing that I found interesting, a little bit of news, is that the Cubs are doing a minor league mini camp later this week, basically, where they're bringing, I believe it's 14 prospects up to Wrigley to sort of do what you and Ken did this week. You were maybe your prospects 15 and 16, but they're taking 14 prospects sort of behind the scenes and just introducing them to Wrigley, introducing them to certain people around the park, getting them to see, like, sort of just comfortable with it. And I thought this was really interesting. I know they've done things like this on an individual basis with guys after they drafted them early. I know they brought Ian Happ up to the majors when his dad was sick, his dad who has since passed, so he could get like a look and so they could be there together and stuff, which was a very cool thing. And I think this is a cool thing in general, because looking at the names that they're picking for this mini camp, these are clearly names that they're thinking about, that we know as top end prospects with the Cubs, but also leaning towards the closer to getting called up side. And Jed Hoyer's or not Jed Hoyer, excuse me, Jared Banner, VP of Player Development, said the goal is for this to be a precursor to their first call up to Wrigley. Want to give them a chance to meet the coaching staff, support staff, etc., get used to their surroundings. I think it's a great idea. The names they're bringing up are for this minicamp: Ben Brown, who they got for David Robertson from the Phillies, Ryan Jensen, DJ Hers, Jordan Wicks, Ben Leeper, Daniel Palencia. Palencia, the Cubs got in the Chafin trade, throws about 1 billion miles an hour and is very exciting. And then the hitters: Brennan Davis, Pete Crow Armstrong, Owen Casey, Matt Mervis, Chase Strumpf, Darius Hill, Jonathan Perlaza, and Yohendrick Penango. So I think that's pretty cool. It gives us a little peek at who they're thinking of as being closer to the doorstep,
Will this be open to the public? Can we just go hang out and watch that?
That's a great question. I do not know that, but coming up later this week, they're bringing a bus full of dudes to Wrigley, so that's pretty fun.
Very cool. Very cool. And Ken Schultz.
And Ken Schultz and Adam Mamawala. And if you want to see photos, by the way, of Ken and Adam on the field and some pretty cool perspectives, once again, go to @AwayGamesPod on Twitter and Instagram. Adam, anything else before we get into your Wrigley adventures with Ken?
I guess just the last thing I'll say is that we're recording this a week after the last time, as we are wont to do. And Aaron Judge has still not hit another home run since hitting number 60, which I don't know if it makes me feel better or worse, but there's a part of me that's like, you couldn't have slumped a little sooner. Right. It does confirm that it is not, in fact, easy to just hit a home run. Conspiracy theory, who's paying him off to keep not hitting it so that they can keep selling tickets and tickets and tickets, get Zach Hampel to buy out whole sections of stadiums? I mean...
Anytime Zach Hampel can burn through money he shouldn't have to begin with, and get nothing from it, I'm very happy with. And if you don't,
Pujols hit 700. Don't worry about it.
And Pujols got 700. Yes, absolutely. So that's I'm fine with that. I am not mad about it.
I'm happiest that he didn't do it in St. Louis, so they didn't get to have that moment.
That is funny. Yeah, I think that's a perfect level, the perfectly reasonable level of pettiness and bitterness that
Right.
I can
Happy for
share.
Pujols, would not have wanted any extra joy for the St. Louis fans. I think that's
Yeah,
reasonable.
I think that's great. Gracious even. So yes, and then but Judge, yeah, he's selling those tickets by not homering. It's an interesting tactic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, we'll see what happens. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say by the next time you and I are talking, he will have done it. That's a week from now. It would be
I hope
shocking if he
so.
hadn't, but let's hope for him, because I'm sure that's not fun to have that kind of pressure. But
Yeah. I hope so. And I think you referenced this in a tweet, but I think as soon as he hits 61,
he's
he's
gonna
hitting
explode.
62 immediately.
Yeah.
I think, I wish I could
Might do
put
the old
money
Sosa
down.
game, 61
Yeah.
and 62 in the same game.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If only Jose Lima were still around to pitch to him.
Bring him back. Bring him back. Resurrect him. Honestly, if anyone faked their own death, Jose Lima was that kind of a fun wild card, I think. So bring him back, folks. Yeah. So
all right. Well, here's me and Ken Schultz talking about our once in a lifetime experience. All right, folks. So as we mentioned before, I am here with your friend, my friend, everybody's friend, Ken Schultz. Ken, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Kevin got pissed and left. So what are you going to do?
He stormed out. He said, "Why didn't you invite me?" Even though he wasn't in the same state. He flipped a table so hard that it landed back on its legs, which I've never seen before. But nevertheless, we are here to talk about our incredible, truly once in a lifetime experience of being on the field at Wrigley and not being tackled because of it. So a little bit more quick context. I have a friend named Amy who I actually grew up with, went to high school with in New Jersey, but she is a third generation Cubs fan. It's been one of her dreams, as it is for a lot of us, to one day have season tickets. She has accomplished that, perhaps not in the best year, but she has accomplished that. And one of the perks of being a season ticket holder is that there is a weekend event when the Cubs are out of town, during which you can invite friends and family to come and partake in all sorts of activities in and around and on the field at Wrigley. It just so happened that I was at Zany's Rosemont when this was occurring. She was able to get me a ticket, and then once that happened, I was like, I don't want to be greedy, but if there are other tickets floating around, I know someone who would appreciate it just as much, if not more. And so she was able to hook it up. I was able to invite Ken, and there you go. That's our context. So, Ken, I guess share with me your thoughts. I don't know if we can walk people through exactly how the day worked, but overall, what are your impressions a couple days later?
Yeah, I think what we learned from Amy's story is that the best way to make everybody's lifelong dreams come true is to start Esteban Quiroz at second base.
I mean, it makes, as someone who's a bit later in life and hasn't quite done everything in my career that I've wanted to, Esteban Kiros inspires me. He makes me realize that maybe it just hasn't happened yet. I should be patient. By the way, he's like 30. He's not even old.
There's an Esteban Quiroz inside all of us, I think, is the inspirational moral to this story. Yeah, it was a really just uplifting afternoon, honestly, of which there have been few and far between, it seems like, this year. So, in and of itself, it was just nice to spend 3 hours inside Wrigley Field and not be pissed off at anything. Like that, that's a good start already.
Right.
And honestly, what I will take most from the day, this was your first time on the field itself at Wrigley, is what I gather.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I've taken a couple tours myself with my dad. I've done a couple of Father's Day presents in 2001, and then earlier this year we also did the tour to kind of get a sense of the updates. And so seeing your reaction to being there for the first time and just watching your face light up and random moments of you putting your arm around my shoulder just because you couldn't contain just how ebulliently happy you were. That's what being baseball pals is all about.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that makes baseball or any sport so cool is that it does make you feel like a kid again. And despite not actually playing baseball when I was a child, I think I did have a childlike quality in a lot of what we got to experience, and that's in sending videos and photos and stuff to my girlfriend Celia. That's what she kept describing, was I feel like you're like a 10-year-old, and it's reminiscent of the famous Pat Hughes call after the Cubs won the World Series, of the Cubs are leaping and celebrating like a bunch of delirious 10-year-olds or whatever it is that he says. So yeah, it was God, it was really cool. So the day began with us kind of lining up outside on Clark and Addison. It seemed like a lot of people, but it wasn't really that many once you actually got inside. Like thinking of how many folks are usually in Wrigley, it wasn't too crazy. But we started out. We got some free food, and then Ken and I just kind of hung in the concourse down the third base line to just hang out and eat some food. And then, well, I guess we threw our food away, and I looked over at Ken and I said, "Hey, Ken, want to have a catch?"
Thankfully, I knew enough to remember to say, I'd like that.
And what was interesting about it was I guess I kind of assumed that they would like funnel us through a particular entrance onto the field, but in actuality, they just had all those little doors open, like kind of the short doors that people who are ball kids and whatnot and security will go in and out of during the game. And
Yeah,
so we just walked right onto the field.
that's kind of a metaphor for life in Ricketts land, isn't it? That if you make enough money to afford season tickets, yeah, we'll open every door to you. That's quite all right.
Well, I guess we got the loophole
Right.
advantage of knowing someone who
Mhm.
has enough money to have season tickets. But yeah, so we began the day by going out and walking around on the outfield a bit. We had a catch briefly, and
I will
yeah,
put my contributions to the catch in the biggest air quotes possible. But yeah, after playing
it's
catch,
true.
it's
I
been a
was
while.
more of a goalie at points,
Yeah,
but that's okay. We didn't injure anyone.
it's been a while for me, and I would say once every maybe five or so that I was throwing, it was like, wow, I now understand what it means when Kyle Hendricks says he can't find his release point because I had no idea. Yeah, yeah, I was doing some full on Rick and Keels there,
Oh
unfortunately.
gosh.
Yeah.
Well, we still accomplished playing catch. You threw it to me and I caught it. I caught it and threw it back to you. We
Yeah.
did that at least enough times to say that we played catch at Wrigley. But time was of the essence because we only had 2.5 hours by the time we had a bite to eat. We really only had 2 hours to do a lot of the activity. So a quick rundown of what they offered. You could go on the field and play catch. That was kind of you can do that the whole time if you want, sit on the grass, whatever you want to do. Then there were bouncy castles and whatnot for kids in the outfield. You could go into I believe the Cubs bullpen had a pitching experience and the visitors bullpen had a hitting experience. We didn't get to do those. We didn't really prioritize those. And then you could also go into the dugout, both dugouts, go into the Cubs clubhouse, go into the press box. So we didn't get to do all of that, but we started out on the field. And I mentioned this to Kevin a little bit when we recorded the other part of the pod yesterday, but my experience being on the field was just so interesting to have that eye line
Mhm.
after watching it from the other side our entire lives. And I know you've been on the field in some form before, but would you kind of echo those sentiments?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. I've been on the field twice before. So it's not like I'm a going on the field hipster or anything at this point. The part that really strikes me about that is it's the unique eye line, and for me, it's also like getting to see as performers, we get to see what
Right.
it feels like to be at the center of being surrounded by 40,000 seats in one of the most famous venues in the entire country like that.
Mhm.
And I don't know about you, but I kind of always get myself in that mindset of walking out there, and when you can kind of imagine all those chairs being filled with people, how does that ever get old if you're a player? Like, how does
Oh
that
yeah.
not energize you every single day, having that many people looking at you and being at the center of that kind of particular, I don't know, storm's not the right word,
Right.
uh, but that kind of event.
Well, it's one of the things that I think about the most for someone like an Esteban Kiros who spent most of his career in the minors and now all of a sudden he's standing in front of that amount of people. Perhaps not at this point in the year, but the point being that yeah, I can't imagine going from playing in college and playing in the minors to all of a sudden being in that environment. And it also gives you some sense of how intimidating it must be for someone like an Aaron Judge, who right now is not only the person in stadiums with 40,000 people, but they're analyzing his every swing, every move, everything. So yeah, it was very cool. And Ken and I also talked about the fact that we've watched so many games over the years, and in the past decade there have been so many meaningful games that it's hard to not have specific associations with particular parts of the ballpark. So we didn't get to go take a photo there because there was one of the bouncy castles in front of it, and apparently we were, quote, too old to participate. But
Yeah.
we, like, if you go over by the 368 mark in left center, that to me is always, oh yeah, that's where KB hit the home run in the World Series. We did take a photo by the 400 marker. I don't know if you have any specific center field memories there. I'm sure there are many, but nothing specifically comes to mind with that marker.
Yeah, that particular marker, I don't know necessarily, but the one that popped into my mind, and I mentioned it at some point during the day, was Sammy Sosa in 2003 hitting the ball on top of the camera well
Yeah.
in deep center
Oof.
field
Yeah.
in the 2003 playoffs. So I guess that's I guess the closest like mental image I have to that 400-foot marker.
Exactly.
In terms of what you mentioned in terms of like the landmarks of the park that we just kind of have mentally set aside, like I always try whenever I go to a game to spend at least one moment, step outside, and do like the mental checkpoint of Javi home run in the basket and left,
Yep.
the spot where the two Sandberg game home runs in kind of straightaway left, and then the Bryant over 368, and then the Miguel Montero grand slam at the top of the kind of right center bleachers like that.
Right.
And when we were later in the day in line behind the plate, which we'll get to in a second, but I tried to make sure to kind of take a moment and take a look from home plate to each of those areas and just kind of picture what that actually looked like in that moment, because I'd never seen it from that particular perspective before.
Totally, yeah, and I think I also mentioned, like, just think of how far that is. Like when you're standing behind home plate, to think of where Glenn Allen Hill hit that ball on top of the building, or to think of that Sosa shot, or the Schwarber on top of the Budweiser sign, any of those, or even I think I mentioned KB and Wilson off the scoreboard the couple of times they did that. Like that is so far. I don't know that I could hit a golf ball that far. And these guys are just flicking it out. So we spent some time on the field. We got to meet up with Amy and her dad, which was cool. Just kind of said hello to them briefly. Played catch. Got a couple photos. I had Ken. We both filmed each other catching the ball and doing some having a little fun, little Sandberg impression that I think Ken has posted some photos of.
I'm proud of that.
Went,
Like, that actually came off.
it looks pretty good. I don't want to give myself credit, but I'm proud of my photography. So we then went into the Cubs.
Wexler in you.
We went into the Cubs dugout, and that kind of funnels into the Cubs clubhouse, which that was a long wait. That probably took like 30 or 40 minutes, kind of snaking us around, but it was definitely worth it. You certainly can see why first of all, why the upgrades were necessary, and also how nice they are. So we were waiting in that hallway that you all have seen many images of on social media, of players getting pumped up or ebulliently coming in after games, and that was cool to see, because we've seen all those videos of our heroes walking in and out of that hallway in the past 5 years. When you got into the clubhouse, it was cool, and I mentioned this to Kevin also, like, looking around at the names on those jerseys does give you, it was a real stark reminder of where this team is at, despite how cool the day was. But did you have any other thoughts on the clubhouse?
Yeah, it's weird that my eyes went directly to Hayward in that. That was the one that really kind of popped out to me. That even though he's not been a presence with the team at all for most of the past couple months, he still has like one of the sweet spots of the clubhouse, like one of the not corners, but I guess entryway adjacent is, I guess, the best way to describe it.
Right.
So like that's still, I guess, showing him a sign of the respect he has earned and deserves in that clubhouse, is that even though you're not a part of the active team anymore, you're still important enough to actually get this particular part here of the locker room.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And we were not allowed to take photographs in the clubhouse itself, which is obviously totally fair. But I will tell you that the final two images you see before you enter the clubhouse, on the right you see the World Series trophy, and on the left you see a photo of Ernie Banks and Ron Santo arm in arm, which is really, really cool.
That's 3 trophies.
Yeah. Yes, it is. So we got to pop in there. Then on our way out, we spent a little bit of time in the Cubs dugout. And then someone informed us, hey, Andre Dawson is in the
Yeah.
visitors dugout.
I'm grateful. I was wearing my MLB Jam Andre Dawson Ryan Sandberg T-shirt that day because it's an amazing shirt. And someone in the clubhouse said, "Hey, great shirts," which I get that a fair amount when I wear that to Wrigley, because it's a cool shirt, and it seems like only a few people wear it, so it gets kind of a little bit of buzz that way.
Right.
My industry buzz, what can I say? And so she mentioned just kind of casually that, yeah, Dawson's in the visiting dugout, right? And kind of
We
almost,
were like, no. Yeah.
on Stewart double take. So
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I think we know where we're going to be heading right after this. So we did the runaround first before more saunter, because my 43 years on Earth, would like to not run anywhere that doesn't involve catching the L.
Well, given that we did see an adult man severely injure himself, I think it was better that we took our time.
Yeah, and honestly, what I wanted to get out there for before we get into the Dawson, this was the part, other than meeting Andre, that really stuck with me most personally from the day. Was I wanted to like take a pause at kind of playing the equivalent of the second base position in the infield, and then just do kind of what I mentioned earlier, of take that look around and just really try to absorb myself in, okay, this is what Rhino saw every day when he was out there.
Yeah.
That's sacred ground a little bit. And it's
Absolutely
also, it's the only chance I've ever had to kind of put myself in my own shoes, in my favorite player's position that way, and just kind of see, okay, that's what the stands look like from here. That's what it looks like to look into the batter and prepare. And yeah, that was kind of my moment of the day, other than seeing you just being joyful all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And I appreciate that they didn't kind of rush us through that experience. They let us take our time. I can attest to the fact that Ken did not secretly scribble fire Jed, sell the team into the dirt or into the ivy or anything. But my little subtle FU was asking the woman standing there to take a photo of me in my Rizzo jersey stretching at first base, just as a reminder of who should be here, who's not here. So I got to do that. I had some great camera work by Ken. I had him roll me a ball and kind of pretend I was Rizzo throwing it out to second, which made for a cool video. Got to run the bases, and similar to what we were talking about just now in terms of how far home runs are, I did take a second to go over behind third base with Ken and be like, do you know how fucking far this throw is? Like, third basemen make this throw look like a casual throw. It is so far. Like, that would be me. I could throw it that far probably, but I would need to like crow hop into a throw from third base into first. So
even it's going to be a tough play. Bryant is probably quite a throw in real life. So
I don't even want to think about how tough of a throw that is. It gives me anxiety. Yeah. So the last thing we got to do, I'm going to let Ken go here so he can get to work. But we got to line up and go into the visitors' dugout to meet Andre Dawson. With the timing of it was good. I would have felt a little bad if we ran the bases and then didn't get to meet him, but we were probably among the last like 30 or 40 people before they cut off the line, and they were like, hey, you're going to run out of time. Now, to the Cubs' credit, which is a statement I have not been able to say a lot recently, anyone who was in line already, they made sure to be like, hey, you're good. Even if it goes past 4 o'clock when they theoretically kick you out, you'll get to meet him. I would say that he was probably quite tired of shaking hands and glad handing by the time we got to him, but still perfectly nice. Ken had him sign. They had these little like 8x10s. I had him sign my softball glove, which it probably seems like a weird move. He actually was like, oh, you better stop playing with this now. I do intend to keep playing with it, but it's going to make me smile every time that I do, because I have a framed Andre Dawson jersey on my wall that my friend Scott gave me, and I intend to print out an 8x10 of me meeting Dawson and put it kind of like in the corner of that. And yeah. So your impressions before we go?
To his credit as well, like he was definitely ready for the day to be over by the time that we had met him, but he was unfailingly polite. And when I posted the picture on my Instagram of myself and him, my dad commented that those are two incredible smiles. And, it's easy for me to have an incredible smile in that point. But, Andre, for him he'd probably been there for 2.5, 3 hours meeting people at that point.
Maybe more if he did the morning session. He might have been there all day.
Yeah, for someone in his mid-60s to
Yeah.
still be able to put that on when the day is that close to being done, I think that speaks very well of how he's able to kind of handle the public and be a public persona. And I noticed that every time there was a kid in line, like his face would light up and he would fist bump them, like he
Yeah.
knew how to make their day special. One of my friends from high school, my friend Eddie Carlos, had brought his kid to the season ticket holder day, and he posted 3 pictures of his, I think, probably 6 or 7-year-old son meeting Dawson, and they're just like that. If you want to just feel good about humanity, those are 3 great pictures right there.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I wanted to just I was trying to, in my mind, in the line as we were talking, I was also thinking, okay, so what can I say to him that doesn't sound like fanboy babble? And I think I settled on just letting him know that the '89 Cubs are one of my favorite teams of all time, and that just saying thank you for being an essential part of that. And
Yeah.
so I'm glad I was able to get that across. And I kind of hope, because like he hears the entire time he's there, hour after hour, people bubbling over in his presence. So it's not like, you're hoping individually to make an impact on him, but you're just kind of hoping, if I can be part of the collective to let him know, thank you for this kind of joy you brought us and for being special. Like, that's what I was hoping from that.
Yeah, I figured I would abstain from telling him that he won the MVP the year I was born. I didn't want to make him feel old. By the way, he looks great. Also, I didn't know he wrote left-handed. Interesting.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
Anyway,
Ricky Henderson.
Exactly. So we'll leave it there. But all that to say that we had an incredible day. It was really, really cool. Frankly, much better than if the Cubs had been in town and I had just gone to a game. Something very special. That already, when I'm like watching the Cubs now, as I'm watching a play at first base, I'm like, I was just standing on that base. Like, there is something cool about having been on that field. And finally, Ken and I wanted to thank Amy for hooking it up. It was truly an incredible experience. And so we employed the services of none other than voice of your Chicago Cubs, Pat Hughes. And Pat turned around a cameo in like a day. We sent it to her last night. She really appreciated it. I'll play some of it now. And much like Pat did for Kevin, really went above and beyond. He's a gem. He should be protected at all costs. And we'll leave you with that.
Hello to Amy. It's Pat Hughes, radio announcer for the Chicago Cubs. I was contacted by Adam Mamawala, and he wrote a very nice note basically thanking you for a very special time. I'm going to read it, Amy, word for word. It says, Amy is a Cubs season ticket holder and was kind enough to invite me and my friend Ken to Wrigley this past weekend for Family Day. Could you please tell her that Adam and Ken say thank you for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Consider it done. Amy, thank you for being a great fan and a season ticket holder. Next year is going to be better. The Cubs are going to have a busy offseason. I just feel that we are going to acquire some brand new players, stronger players, guys that know how to win, and that's exactly what we're going to do next year. And maybe, Amy, at this time, a year from now, maybe a little later than right now, I will have another opportunity to say something like, the Chicago Cubs win the World Series. It gave me enormous pleasure to say those words back in 2016. I say let's all go back and do that again and have some more fun.